We can go ahead and dive into discussing the Cvent portal along with cross-event reports. I did host a session, I believe last week, with the basics of reporting. So cross-event reports is just a slight enhancement on that, which we'll look at today, and how it can bring some efficiency if you do find yourself using event or reports in all of your events. And then we also have the Cvent portal, which is really empowering others to get access to that same data for free in a very secure way. So we'll talk through some of those pros and cons. So the idea around portals, as I said a moment ago, is getting people access to data. And so there is a lot of data around your events, and it might just be how many events are you hosting, or who is going to those events. And so depending on who is asking these sort of questions, who would benefit from this information, it can just kind of be bent in a lot of different ways to benefit a variety of use cases. So one I've heard that's pretty popular is if you have, let's say, a student in your office who prints name tags for your events or something. And if they were coming up to you all the time and saying, hey, could I get that updated registration report so that I could print out those name tags today? Some people would think, oh, well, why don't I just go ahead and give you access to my account and you can log in? And we definitely don't want to encourage anyone doing that, sharing credentials. And then you might also think, well, then let's get them a license. And of course, that comes at a cost, which we often can't afford. So this portal and portal users allows them this free access to get this data in real time, that when they go ahead and run that report, it's as fresh as that data can possibly be. So that can be really valuable and just kind of takes you out of the equation as the middleman. Some other examples I've heard of is like the event planner, for example, where they need to know about meal preferences. That they're the one calling the vendor and seeing how many vegetarian options you need, maybe looking at accessibility needs if anyone indicated they had any, so that they could plan for the event, really prepping the room when we do have those in-person events. A report could be created with data specific to that use case that's relevant to them. So just very different or slightly different perspectives on data that you're able to present to people very easily. I am going to go ahead and pivot a little bit and go through this in a backwards fashion, if you will, and really show you what the portal experience is if you do go ahead and have a portal user. And we do have a wiki out here specific to the portal and how to get reports that you've created added here. And it really is 3 simple steps of requesting a portal user. Oftentimes, right, you kind of just need to do that once, you work with the same people, and then after that, we can publish and unpublish reports for them quite easily. You might not have to do that step 1 after some point. And then, of course, step 2 is requesting that that report actually be published to the portal. So this is not something our users have access to do. They do need to go ahead and get their eComm specialist involved to do that task. And so after that, accessing the portal is the same for everybody. We have this link on here on accessing the portal, and I'm just going to go ahead and open it right now. Oh, and I'm already logged in, apparently. I'll go ahead and log out just for that experience. I did go ahead and set up a portal user. I'm just kind of as a test so that we could see this without all my admin access. So whoever the portal user is sets up their own password initially when they are created as that portal user. So really easy on that front. And then once they log in, everyone's kind of interface looks really similar. The only thing that might vary is what reports are actually presented to that individual. So we have, I guess, over 100 or so reports that have been published to this portal already. And in this use case, I'm only seeing 1. That this is the only relevant one to me. So brings in that security layer that not everyone's seeing everything. I also mentioned that just if you do have these requests with your eComm specialist, make sure you will need to let them know every individual who will need access to this information. I am going to pop into just an event in Cvent. Why not this one? I definitely won't dwell on this. It is a session I hosted previously. It was reporting basics, but I think this is what most people are familiar with when you think of reporting. Very much it's going to look at data specific to this particular event. And there's a plethora of reports that you can run there. Either looking at how much money you're bringing in, what registrants are coming in, who are their guests, what questions are they answering. I think our registrant detail report is by far one of the most popular, seeing who's registering for your events. So what I think is, or one thing that's really cool with this reporting interface is that once you run these reports, you have the ability to save them. And once a report is saved, it's going to populate in the secondary tab under saved reports. The idea here is if you ever log in multiple times and create a report from scratch, probably doing that inefficiently, just go ahead and take those 5 seconds to save it. And then you don't need to recreate it. Might be minor, but long-term definitely save you some time. And the other big efficiency around this is that when this event is cloned, and I actually went ahead and did this right before I hopped onto this session, my test event over here, these reports are also cloned. So when I navigate to reports, and then my reports in the far left column, automatically in my saved reports are those 2 that were already saved. So that can definitely bring efficiency as you use previous events to clone for your new events. So definitely encourage that. But one thing that I think can bring even more efficiency, and this in part plays with how the portal works. So a lot of it's going to come back to your specific use cases, as well as your own preferences and the preferences of your team. But cross-event reports, this idea that rather than pulling data specific to this event, let's say this test event, you can look across many events. So when it comes to using those event reports within the portals, like I just mentioned some of the efficiency that comes out of it, but what happens is if you want those published to the portal, you will need to ask your eComm specialist to publish them. And so then you go ahead and clone your event, and while those reports, those saved reports are also cloned, they are not automatically published. And so while it does bring efficiency as far as you accessing that report in your own events, if you're using the portal, it can start to get a little cumbersome to have that request every time of, hey, can you publish that report again? And while you're at it, probably unpublish the one from my last event, just so it doesn't start cluttering up the entire portal as well as the experience for the ultimate portal user. So if you do find yourself having this request to your eComm specialist to get your event reports published every single time for every single event, cross-event reports might be something that you want to look at. But frankly, if that's not something, a struggle that you've had, you really might not need to look at cross-event reports. So the way that that experience is a little bit different is that once you create your cross-event report, there's a little bit of a learning curve just because you are looking at broader data. But once you set that criteria correctly, it's going to serve you much longer term. And so you can have that eComm specialist go ahead and publish that cross-event report. It behaves very similarly, and that ends up being a one-time request. So as you well, assuming that the criteria you created is going to capture events that you make in the future, that cross event report is automatically going to populate. And so there's no need to get anything republished at that point in time. So specifically that ask of, hey, eComm specialist, please republish or publish this event report, that can kind of go down to a single request. So the efficiency that it is bringing there. So I am going to pop out and actually look at a cross-event report that I have set up. And the example being, let's say that I help with a lot of events. I might create different events for different departments, but I also host my own events. And my boss maybe wants to know how the events that I'm hosting are behaving. So you're able to add this criteria. Instead of looking across all of those events that you might have access to, I only want to look at those that have an event title containing eComm training and university relations, because those are my specific events and what my supervisor would have interest in. I think another way that you might be able to not look at all events in your account, which might be fine in some cases, but if you do have other events and you want it to be more granular, you can often do your advanced criteria based off of planner email address, that you only want to look at events that the event planner is myself, that I'm hosting. So long as that is something that's true of the previous events that I want to report on and true of the events that I'm going to host in the future, it's going to automatically pull in all of that information. So I will pop over to, in your account, you should see cross events in the far left corner and underneath cross event reports. And do note, cross events is not something that's new in the Cvent world. I don't think we heavily promoted it to users at any point in time or until now. But we do want to make sure, of course, with the legacy reports going out the door very, very soon. We've got, what, 48 hours at this point? We do focus on that cross event reports rather than the legacy option. So I've already gone ahead and saved a report that kind of follows this use case of me just wanting to pull in only the events that were this quiz completion new user training, something I hosted a while ago. It was in person where we do training and complete the quiz together, and say because COVID, I might be able to host in-person events again. I want to see how attendance was at those events, but I just want to look at those. I'm going to go ahead, instead of run initially, just say edit, then run report, because it will take a little bit of time. So I'll save that for another little rant. So when you run those reports, you're going to see it's going to mirror identically the interface to reporting, the new reporting within events. So you should already have some familiarity with that. You could change your date range if you wanted to look at a specific type, registration status, but not things that I messed with. What I did want to call out is that advanced criteria. I was able to look at all of these fields. I will say it's a little, I have a minor complaint. I wish there was a search in here because we do have so many fields, so it can sometimes be difficult to find what you want to filter off of. But in this case, I was using event title contains this. Again, a naming convention of my event title that I will always follow when I'm hosting events like this. I'm going to go ahead and run this. We will see how long it takes. Hopefully not too terrible. I guess I will talk about it before I show it. And the cool thing about, and we'll look at how to add filters. You might recall from my previous training that however somebody sets up these filters, which ones they enable, what order they put them in, is all available to portal users when they log in. And so you're really empowering people at the end of the line as well. So you could look at that as a pro or a con, empowering those people or possibly increasing risk. But I just look at it as slightly additional training, which is so well worth it. Well, while that's continuing to load, I will go ahead and mention just one component that you do want to call out. While you're welcome, we don't particularly have any opinion about how you save reports. That's really housed in your own account, and we have no opinion on that. However, if you do get reports published to the portal, because we all share the same portal and we have already over 100 in that account, we find it much easier to organize them and go delete old content when we all follow a naming convention. So not a task on our user's plate whatsoever, but it will impact you. The name of the report might need to be updated a little bit. So we will go ahead and use a 0x. In this case, that's indicating the campus. It might be 01 if you're at Boulder, 04 if you're at UCCS. We'll indicate the department that you're at. We do the event title and then a description of that report. So very minor, but might be worth mentioning to your portal users as well. That is also why I highly encourage you give a good description to your reports, and you have full access on that. So you've got plenty of room to give much better information to those end users. So with this report having ran, you can see in here, or those filters that I indicated or mentioned that you can control by expanding. And then you see this pane on the right-hand side. So you can go ahead and edit those filters if you want them available or not. Maybe you don't want people to be able to filter the data, and maybe some components like invitee status just aren't really relevant. So you can enable them or disable them as well as reorder them. And so with that, what's presented here, how those filters are edited, is going to be available to those portal users. So if somebody wanted to go ahead and only look at one particular event, maybe they wanted to look at events that fell between a certain time frame, they can go ahead and set that time frame, apply it. And I'm mildly terrified how long it's going to take to run if I hit apply at this point. So I think I will hold off on that. So just do want to call out once again, I know I already touched on, but if you're already leveraging portals a fair amount, that is when cross events are probably going to be of value to you, as well as the eComm specialist. Minimize those moments of needing to republish and unpublish individual event reports. I very much consider it that pro, empowering our portal users. Any chance that we have to get data to people, especially when they're going to act on it or be more informed, is time well spent. Barely calling them cons, but there could be an additional kind of training element to showcase to those portal users how these filters work. I migrated somebody from our treasury team, and just the natural learning curve. There's certain things that I didn't call out in training that were very important that I've learned to call out with you all. So lessons learned there. And there are also minor things like exporting the data. The individual that I was working with, they didn't like this grouping with the Excel file that it was providing, which there's some cases, I think a lot of people don't need to export the data. They can just view it in this kind of preview pane, apply these filters and stuff. But in our case, they really needed to export it, and they wanted individual rows and none of this fancy grouping. So we learned together that it was really crucial to use a comma separated value file instead. Just an example of what was a slight learning curve. We, of course, have our resources on our website. I shared that out via chat earlier. And I'll also continue to be hosting Cvent open office hours at least once a week as we go through this transition. So if you want to join that, you're welcome to later this week. Thank you all for your time today.